and he made no mention of sending out the National Guard. And Governor Newsom actually called him a liar in that. Welcome to Queen City News Plus. I'm Brian Blakeley.
And I'm Chief Legal Analyst Khalif Rhodes.
All right, good man. Good to see you as court is in session today. And we're talking about one of our favorite subjects here around our journalism world, and that is a free press. And the appeals court here, they largely reinstated Trump's ban on AP's access to the White House, but they didn't get that open to some parts of the area. So let's go ahead and open that up for a discussion right now with you.
Well, you had this Court of Appeals panel, and you got two folks that were Trump appointees, one that was an Obama appointee, and I hate that we do this now. We're trying to go check the background of the judges before we look at the decision, and we say, well, wait, who appointed them?
Trump judge, right. Obama judge, right. Yeah.
Bush
Biden judge, right?
The other day we saw a Reagan one. So, I mean, there's still folks out there from other judges, but I still am of the belief of
today's political world, by the way.
Right. I'm still in the belief that because I practice in this profession, that judges are above political affiliation and will look beyond their party affiliation and go toward the meat of the case. But the last couple rulings that we've looked at seem to go with political ideology, aside from this one, up until, I should say, most recently, the lower court judge, who was a Trump appointee, is the one that put this in place, that said, look, they're allowed to go into there. You can't ban them specifically based on the viewpoint, and cited and agreed with the plaintiff's request that it was a violation of the First Amendment. The Court of Appeals here, specifically the two, says that these restricted presidential spaces are not First Amendment for open for private speech and discussion. Thus, the White House can restrain and can make discretion to determine who they restrain. And this is the part that really confuses me, including on the basis of viewpoint, which journalists will be or will not be admitted. So let's go to the dissent. And I say this all the time, Brian. The dissent is where you find the juicy portion. That's where you find the best portion in history when you're looking at decisions that were just terrible. Go find the dissent. You had someone in that court that was thinking, and following and making the decision that was based in law. And this is what this judge says. She isn't an Obama appointee. There's something wrong with it. For our military folks watching, they say, what, you're squared away. Well, if you're not squared away, then something is wrong. My brother would say you're a soup sandwich, and no one's eating a soup sandwich. So she says the long-standing First Amendment.
I've tried to eat soup sandwich.
It's not going to work, right? Yeah. It ain't going to work, right? So you're talking about they got the multiple generations of White House practice and tradition and sensible understanding of the rule of free press in our constitutional democracy. But then she says, looking forward, in any merit panel were to accept those theories of the major court's opinion, so perhaps next administration, if it's Democratic, will have a all MSNBC panel, and anybody from Fox will be excluded. And so now we'll have a partisan panel, and that's the opposite of what you want in a free society. You want press on both sides of the aisle covering a story that's not really giving opinion, but actually covering the rules and the actions that are taking place. But if you are saying I can exclude you because I don't like what you say, it would seem like the clear, blind reading of that would be a violation of the First Amendment, which is you're now becoming viewpoint discriminatory as opposed to. And let's
talk about that actions about what the AP was doing. And obviously, when President Trump came into office, he said he wanted to rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. AP said they were not going to do that. He said, well, because of that, I'm going to exclude you from having any kind of access to the Air Force One or to the Oval Office or to Mar-a-Lago, and you can't be there. So that's where this is all really started from. And so the courts have said that they could still not have access to some areas, but they can operate out of the East Room.
We got to look out as well. That video that we're showing, they're showing the Gulf of Mexico. So in this new era of attempting to censor what media or what specific agencies are saying.
Well, it depends on which agency it says. As a Nexstar, we recognize it as the Gulf of America, but
right.
There are many around the world that will not recognize that. It was the Gulf of Mexico, including Mexico, which says we are not going to call it the Gulf of America.
Well, look at AP. AP says we don't just have news in America. We have news around the world. So outside of us, The rest of the entire world still calls it the Gulf of Mexico, which is comical that we're having this discussion. Let's think about the legal fees that go into something like this, Brian. Most attorneys are average.
You guys are happy. The lawyers are happy.
Right.
Because it's tremendous about a legal challenge.
North Carolina
legal
specifically, right? You're talking about maybe $500 an hour, $400 an hour is an average. I mean, but you got these New York attorneys, you got these Washington, D.C., L.A. attorneys. They're charging $2,000 to $3,000 an hour. So you're telling me these lawsuits are going forward, being fought in these places, and in the government. You have to have manpower at each one of these locations to fight these cases from something that would seem like it would be easy to make a determination that, hey, you're the news agency. You can cover it the way you want. And guess what? If I don't agree with it, I got an opportunity to turn the channel. But because I'm telling you that if you don't follow my rules, if you don't follow my thought process, not my rules, but my thought process, then now I'm going to ban you. And that seems to be un-American, specifically because our Constitution gives us the ability to have free speech, the right to free press, that those things that would be fundamentally intertwined and interwoven in the very fabric of who we are as a country. So now if you're saying that you have to be cautious as a company, as a news agency, the way you cover this presidency, I think it's opening up a Pandora's box.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing here is that you have a lot of the Democrats, you have a lot of the free press that's arguing here. This is part of your attack to set up an authoritarian society, and one of the ways you do that is by attacking the norms of a democracy, and one of those is a free press. And that's exactly what is being said right here. And if you have that, and then you have the courts on that, you're attacking the judicial system as well. Then if you have the courts that are siding with a conservative Supreme Court, but also the 63 that are siding with the presidency, then you do have your slippery slope that's going out of democracy into an authoritarian society.
We're past a slippery slope for a lot of these things because you can foreshadow what the approach of the Trump administration has been, which is to challenge the defenses of democracy, to challenge the defenses of the established norms. If you've read on the thought process in the campaign promise of draining the swamp, of changing the new normal, of making sure that things are getting done. And one of your ways of showing and making sure that things are getting done is coming against and trying to challenge the established precedent. In the legal profession, normally that doesn't work. I mean, if you have 50 to 60 years of precedent, that means a history of judicial decisions lining up the exact same way. And then all of a sudden, judges decide to go another way. Typically, you want something catastrophic to happen. Plessy v. Ferguson, I think, is one example. The court's making the statement that separate is equal in Brown versus the Board of Education, where the court was clearly not liking it, and the tone of that time was shifting and changing, where they said, no, separate is inherently unequal. Well, that took 50 years of fighting. That took a long time before we got there. It wasn't something that was done overnight. And these types of cases that are being brought before the court on emergency appeals, that are jumping up quickly from district court, the Court of Appeal, the Supreme Court, in the record pace, these are the types of cases that are going to shift 40 to 50 years of precedence in a matter of months.
And what you're also seeing, too, is like you have the AP, which is fighting this in court. There are several other news agencies that are not, that are kind of bending the knee, so to speak, and kind of bending also the line of democracy away from free press.
It's from that risk management perspective. If I'm saying, look, do I have the resources to fight this? Can I go up against the Goliath that is the president of the United States? Do I have the time, energy, and effort? Or could I say, you know what, I'm going to call it that for the next 3.5 years, and then after that I can go back to calling it the Gulf of Mexico or whatever it wants to be called? But will this stop me from doing my job? If I'm not in the room where it happens, to pull a Hamilton reference, do I now have an opportunity to even do my job and tell the news? If I'm not on Air Force One, if I'm not in these small press briefings and press rooms, and I'm only in the East Wing, now am I effectively cornering myself out because I'm standing on a hill that maybe not worth fighting for?
Yeah, and the AP, the gold standard when it comes to how we follow our journalistic ethics and standards, and that's and so they're fighting for everything that they can for all the rest of the journalists that are out here in the United States of America. All right, so where do you think this goes?
I mean, I think it ultimately lands to the Supreme Court. This is the type of case that is right for the Supreme Court. You have a lower court decision. You've had it appealed to the Court of Appeals, and now the Supreme Court will have an opportunity to grant cert. I mean, that's about as far as my crystal ball can see. Any vision further than that, I can't really give you. What I can tell you is once it gets to the Supreme Court, it'll be an interesting conversation, because a lot of these Republican justices, the ones that are now, saying that they're strict constitutionalists, folks that have been for years relying on old precedent to stand firm on their belief system, will be challenged with cases like this, where you're saying that, okay, I'm going to disregard the precedent that is there in terms of historical basis of way judges have ruled, specifically on First Amendment basis, and now I'm going to rule in this favor. This will be a true challenge of not just to judiciary, but to our Supreme Court justices to see if they can set aside personal bias and follow what the rule of law says, specifically when you're looking at precedent. This is, I think, a very, very complex case, and we're attempting to make it something that's bite-sized and be able to digest. But when you look at the easiest portion of this to look at is this a First Amendment argument or not? The Court of Appeals, these two judges say this isn't even a First Amendment argument at all.
All right, we're going to leave that one there right now. And when we take a short break here from Queen City News Plus, we're going to pick this thing back up here as court is going to be in session. We're going to talk about the National Guard being implemented by the Trump administration to Los Angeles over the protest of immigration. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Queen City News Plus. Order in the court right now. Brian Blakeley, Khalif Roj. And our next subject that we're going to be talking about here, Khalif, is going to be the Trump administration authorized the deployment of 2,000 National Guard troops in Los Angeles. So this was after the protest began on Friday, as people were in Los Angeles were protesting the Immigration and Custom Enforcement ICE arrest of 44 people in the city for violating immigration laws. All right, so talk about from the legal aspect of where we go from here.
Well, I mean, you want to first start with, do people have a right to protest? And I think it's clear that our country was founded on protesting against England, against their control. I mean, and so our four founders wanted to ensure that obviously something that we used to get our freedom, something to get our independence, that was something that was added to the Constitution, and having those protections to protest. Now we're talking about a lawful protest and not unlawful protest. There's a clear difference between rioting and protesting. But also, I'd say anyone that's protesting, and if they are dealing in participating in things like throwing of rocks and tear gas and other things like that, they'll probably say that, look, the person that makes a determination of if it's a riot or a protest can't be the person that is being protested against. Typically, it's the protester that is frustrated, that's confused, that's trying to figure out, well, why a situation is occurring, and they are lashing out at whatever agency, entity, or person they believe is the reason for it. But I think from a legal standing, the question is, can you protest? Yes. So then, does the government have an ability to send and police the protest? The time, place, and manners. Probably the first thing I'd say in terms of the First Amendment. The government can say, yes, you can protest, but you can't protest here. You got to do it down the street, or you got to do it next week. But then, if that attempt to manage and maneuver and police you doesn't work, well, what else can you do? And in most instances, you'd have the some type of military force or military presence that would be added. And so the president of the United States can call in any branch of the military, specifically the Marines. In this case, 700 plus troops on the ground in the Marines. But now the question is, can the president send out National Guard troops? That's where it gets a little bit murky. Typically, the National Guard, and folks may not know this, but the National Guard is controlled and underneath the supervision of the governor of the state. Yes, it has a dual supervision process. He's the chief commander-in-chief, the president is, but in terms of the National Guard, they serve at the pleasure of the governor of that state. And so in this instance, it would be Governor Newsom that would need to make a call and a request for the National Guard to come out, unless what the Trump administration attempted to do, Section 10, Title 10, Section 12406, where they're saying that the president can, if there is a rebellion. So now we're not just protesting. Now we're not just rioting, but now there is a rebellion, and this rebellion is against the United States. And if there is a rebellion against the United States, then underneath that category of events, the president does have authority to call out the National Guard and to bring in those troops underneath the federal authority. So there are a number of steps that would typically have to take place. But first, you'd want the governor to see and make an opportunity to do that first.
You mentioned the governor there, Governor Newsom, Gavin Newsom of California. He was talking about how he was very upset that this happened because he said on Friday night in a news conference, a live interview, that he had a conversation with President Trump on the phone on that Friday, the night before, the Thursday or Friday, I believe it was, and he made no mention of sending out the National Guard. And Governor Newsom actually called him a liar in that.
And a lot of those types of things with Governor Newsom and President Trump is I take a lot of it with a grain of salt because Governor Newsom is still has political aspirations down the road. And so a lot of these attacks will be like a person saying, I'm tough on crime, right? Well, if I can show to the Democratic base that I'm tough on Trump, then now hopefully they will want to endorse me in 2028 as we move forward. But what I can say is that typically you would allow the governor to make this determination. And then after the governor has made a determination or not, and if that we can meet the hurdle of it being some type of rebellion, I think that it'll fail for that issue. I mean, you see that California now has decided to sue, and they're suing on the same basis that I'm mentioning here in this law. If they're citing this Title 10, Section 12406 as my basis for why I have authority as the president to usurp and control now these National Guardsmen, I'd want to know, well, where's the rebellion? It can't just be these folks protesting on the street. You're going to need to be able to have something that you can point to that's more than that, because any protest can now be a rebellion. It is people protesting against the United States in the government, but they're not rebelling. Rebellion would be I'm attempting to overthrow, to overtake, as opposed to
you
fight.
say that because that's one of the things is many of the Democrats like California Governor Gavin Newsom, also Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, and former Vice President Kamala Harris are saying there's the hypocrisy of this when you're talking about compared to January 6th, whereas protesters were rioting on the U.S. Capitol and police and lawmakers' lives were at risk. Marines actually were waiting on helicopters that day to be given the word to go up and protect those American citizens. And the president did not give the order.
Didn't give the order, and still to this day, there is no insurrection.
And now he deploys the National Guard in this case.
Right. And so with that case is, again, I'd say it's down to political ideologies. If I'm the president and I'm involved in that situation where I've motivated and rallied those folks up to go and storm the Capitol, and then after everything happened, I pardoned a number of these individuals and allowed them to be removed from any prosecution that they were dealing with, and never really admit that there was an insurrection where officers were hurt, where folks were killed, or this situation where a number of individuals since then have had mental health concerns after that insurrection occurred. Now, that is probably the closest that we've had in this country in the last, 50 to 60 years of some type of rebellion where you can say, this is government taking place, and I have people that are attempting to stop the peaceful transfer of power. I mean, that's probably the clearest cut example of what a rebellion is. And we can't even get the Republican Party to agree that occurred. We had a whole January 6th hearing, and during that process, most of it was denying that the events even occurred that day. So when you're talking about this situation here, I think if we're playing this by ear, a court in California would say that that the president exceeded his authority to be able to call out these troops because there has to be a pointing to a rebellion. It's like the Alien Enemies Act. If you're saying these guys are invading, you have to be able to point to it. But just like what he's doing with the tariffs, if you're using the tariffs and it has to be done under an emergency. So you got three different scenarios where the attorneys that are around President Trump are advising him of getting to ways that he wants to do things, which I think that's great lawyering. You come to me with a problem, I'll give you a solution, and then you can decide to go with that solution or not. So I want to raise tariffs. Well, Mr. President, you can get there, but it has to be an emergency. Great. We'll say that the deficits are an emergency. Well, I want to figure out how I can get rid of folks. Okay, it has to be some type of insurrection. We can say that the terrorists that are coming from Mexico because they're in the cartel, now that's an insurrection and this is some type of invasion, and I can go after those guys. Well, now finally with this one right here, I want to be able to get the National Guard today, and I don't want to wait for Governor Gavin Newsom to do it. So what do I need to do? Well, hey, Mr. President, they're here in the corner, Title 10, Section 12406. You can point right to there as how you have authority, but you just got to say that they're rebelling against the country. So now in any speech that I say is we are trying to stop these folks that hate this country, that are rebelling against America. Even though they are constitutionally allowed to protest, if I can categorize it as a rebellion, now I'm in the clear. So great lawyering by the folks to be able to find ways to get their client, who's the president, to where he wants to go. I just think a number of these manners to get there may not be constitutional.
Yeah, and we're going to have to see how these play in court as they go forward, especially with the state of California suing now and setting up that what a lot of people in California say they want a civil war of some sorts going forward.
I think that if we're playing this, trying to figure out the next steps, I think a court in California will clearly find that the president exceeds his authority. Now, a court of appeals, that's going to be a different argument for another day. I think when it makes it to the court of appeals, if you're ultimately saying, do I want National Guard troops on the ground? I think we can all see the videos that the folks there need assistance, but how those different boots on the ground get there, it's something that is not semantics. This is really a process that's supposed to be followed. And so even if Governor Newsom wants to have those folks there, that's something that he can make a determination that's rightfully, and you would assume that would have occurred during that phone call conversation that, hey, Newsom, are you going to bring out the troops, or do I need to figure out a way around you? But if to not even have a conversation about it also underscores that I don't need your help. I can figure this out on my own.
All right, we're going to leave that one there right now. And when we come back here on Order in the Court on Queen City News Plus, we're going to be talking about another course for this a court decision here where they handed the Trump administration 2 victories in cases last week involving the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, including giving it access to Social Security systems containing personal data on millions of Americans. We'll be right back on Queen City. Welcome back to Queen City News Plus. Brian Blakeley here with Chief Legal Analyst Collie Frodes. We're talking about Supreme Court here. Handed the Trump administration 2 victories last week involving cases of the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, including giving it access here to the Social Security system containing the personal data of millions of Americans.
Right, no taxation without representation. That's things that were echoed.
I learned that.
You just learned that kind of in school, right? That was kind of at the forefront in the foundation of who we are as a country, right? Like, we don't want you to tell us what to do, some dictator over the water. I need to be able to have a say. That's why we have a representative type of process. That's why we have a congressional Senate type of process. You can go pick your senators, and those people you elect, they go speak on your behalf. And if you don't like them, guess what? You can get rid of them. One of the things that we've also done, and it's kind of evolved over time, specifically with technology, we've moved from books and we've went to this electronic process of paperwork and documentation and gathering of information. We want to ensure that that information is protected. So the first part of this 2 different lawsuits is, who should have access to it? I mean, if you haven't, DOGE can have access to it. What type of agency are they? Are they someone that works at the pleasure and the leisure of the president? Are they a cabinet level position? Is this something that was created? And we already know it was created through the president, because President Obama actually created this original infrastructure of what DOGE is now today. President Trump comes in, changes the name, changes the direction a tad bit, going after waste and efficiency, but still it's the same government agency that falls under the executive branch. So at some point they were attempting to say this is some watchdog group. This is some government advisory group, right? But if it's a government advisory group, then it's required to do a couple of things. And so what this group is asking first when they filed the lawsuit is, we're not saying that DOGE can't get access to this information. What we're saying is they can't get access to it now. We need to ensure that before they get access to it, the people that will be looking at this information have went through the proper backgrounds and checks and protocol to get access to this documentation. My brother's in the military. He says it all the time. Just because you have a clearance to see this information, do you have a need to know? So the DOGE is saying, hey, I have a need to know. My need to know is I want to cut down on waste and efficiency. But now, do you have the proper clearance to get access to the information that you want to know? Typically, you would want to make sure folks that are looking at your private personal information, this data that they should not have access to, they've went through some type of clearance process to be able to have access to it. But the court saying no harm will be done by allowing them to go through it and not putting it on pause while the case plays its part and works its way through the court system. The other portion is this transparency issue. And even if I can set aside and say, you know what, I can understand how the court got to that point. We can allow Doge to go look at it. I am completely confused how the court is saying that Doge doesn't have any transparency requirement. I want to know what they're asking for, what they're looking for, like any other government agency. And that's why I made that taxation without representation statement. Well, if you're going to say that Doge is an agency and they can get access to this Social Security information, well, then I want to know what they're talking about on the other side. And that's that, well, if they're not an agency, then they shouldn't get access. But if you're giving them access and they are an agency, I should have transparency. I would think you can't do one without the other. And so I echo what the judge from the other story said. How do you square that? You can't square that by saying, I give you access, but the American people, the public, the folks that want to see this, no, you guys don't get access to knowing what Doge is finding out. I mean, to me, it's comical that you can say these guys can go get this information, but we can't figure out what they're doing with it. We won't be able to know it. And I mean, and most of these guys are, social media folks that Elon Musk has put together. If the guy that's in charge has a name that's too not safe to say on the news, it's probably one that you want to make sure that we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's. And right now, I'm not sure. I mean, the court, I can say it's a win and a half for President Trump. I wouldn't say 2 full wins, because even though the court here didn't say that said that they don't have to turn over Doge's information right now under the FOIA, they're saying they're sending it back to the lower court to get clarity on that information. And so I think I just don't understand how you give them that access without giving them that oversight.
It is a battle that will continue to play out in court, and we will be watching here. And you have been watching Order in the Court here with Chief Legal Analyst Khalif Rhodes and myself, Brian Blakeley. Thanks for watching here on Queen City News Plus.
Queen City News Plus. Just search Queen City News on your smart TV's app store.